So here we are again. You just returned from a nice holiday in Portugal, where it was colder than here in Belgium. um, but yeah, I'm in my usual place. I mean, usually for the podcast, I try to find a better spot. But yeah, I've been working all day on launching a new website, and I just want to keep an eye on it. So we have a new website we built with love, and that's why I'm here. I didn't have the time to move around. Definitely check it out and also, if anyone has feedback on that. Have you seen it already, Sjimi?
I have checked it, yeah. I've checked it this
That's
morning.
good. Great. Cool. I want to touch on two things. Let's start with something that happened recently in our team that I think makes sense to draw attention to broader audience. It's something sensitive, right? We had a security incident at one of our customers, and actually, I'll try to explain what happened. And then I want to hear from you. What are things that we could potentially do, or that we already did to change? I mean, to try to prevent this from happening. So, what happened is that one of our employees, who's already with us for quite some time, used GitHub personal access tokens years ago to set up a deployment pipeline on a server of one of their side projects. So that meant that the personal access token was physically on the server in probably an end file or something like that, because they used it to, I think, do a git checkout or git clone of the repo. And then at one point in time, it was a project that did with someone else. They parted ways. The other person continued, and basically the access token was still on the server, and they didn't have access to it anymore, so they couldn't revoke it, the personal access token. So years later, that server got hacked. It was a WordPress thing, I guess, and basically they managed to get all the files on the server, including the .env file with the access token. And then some more years later, they used that access token to log into their GitHub account and download some repositories. And that's, of course, the breach that happened. And I think it's interesting because it's something that happened over a long time range, right? Years. It's also something that could happen to, I guess, every organization, because it's personal access tokens. And personal access tokens basically means have the old style personal access token, have access to everything that you have access to in GitHub. So this could even happen with someone that did that before they joined your company, if this access token is still active. And that's of course, and we were thinking about it. We had a post-incident call, and also during the incident, we were thinking like, what could we have done to prevent this from happening? And maybe, Sjimi, you can dive a bit into that. Like, what are the things we're thinking of now that we could do or could have done maybe differently in the past as well?
I think it's definitely something that we can learn from, whether you're a client, whether you're whatever organization you are, and we can learn from it. And I think, just to add some more context, it was indeed, these personal access tokens, they call them classic now. They go way back, right? I think it's a token maybe from 8 years ago. Nowadays, you have a new version of personal access token where you have to go fine-grained. And I think that's already an important nuance is, make sure if you have a GitHub account, check your personal access tokens, get rid of classic tokens.
I just deleted all of them.
Yeah, I didn't have any, but you just have to basically, you have to get rid of them because they were all encompassing. What did it mean? Like, any organization you got added to, it would get access to all of the repositories there, which is, if you think about it, absolutely crazy. So, use the fine-grained access token, and as an organization on GitHub, you should make sure you have that setting configured as well, right? I think at the client, they didn't have that setting configured where they were still able to leverage classic access tokens. With the new system as well, as an organization, when a GitHub account tries to create an access token, you will be able to see it. You will have to approve it. You can revoke it. So it's all controlled now.
So it's not for the personal classic ones, which you can still create, right?
Yeah, you can still create them, but you cannot manage them as an organization. But yeah, you can have a setting. You have a setting where you can say, don't give access to anybody that creates personal access. So that's an important setting to start.
No, you cannot disable access to your org for anyone who has created that kind of access token. The only thing that you can prevent is from someone to access your organization using that access token.
Exactly.
I think that's a big difference, because if we could have prevented someone to be able to be a member of our organization, it would have never happened, because then we could have seen it like, okay, there is a personal access token on these accounts, but there was no way to enforce that, because this happened on a customer account, right?
Yep.
Where they didn't have the setting to disallow that.
No, it would
I
be
think
a
it's a
bit
very
like, it's like with GitHub now, you can enforce two-factor authentication, and you can join the organization if two-factor authentication is not on. It would be like a similar system, but yeah, I think everybody should enable this setting. And then I think the second thing is, although it's a bit of a hassle, it would be worth considering as an organization if every person that you need to onboard on GitHub should have a dedicated company GitHub account. So usually you have your personal account, and I know GitHub terms are a bit vague about it, but GitHub terms says you can only have one GitHub account, with the context of being it a free account, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's totally fine to create a dedicated company account, and I think it splits it up more, even more nicely. And if I'm not mistaken, with a GitHub Enterprise account, you can actually create these accounts or manage these accounts from within your enterprise. It's quite expensive, but it depends on the level of organization or your needs, of course. So I think that's the second thing to check.
Is it a hassle to work with multiple GitHub accounts?
I have it for customers I'm active on, and it's a bit of a hassle, especially if you use different tokens and you have to SSH, but you get used to it. You can configure it via one password as well. Once you're onboarded, it's fine. It's a bit of a hassle, but I think it's worth it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, lesson learned, I guess. Nothing that we couldn't have done a lot, but I think it's worthwhile sharing this with the world, because it can happen to everyone.
Yeah. In a way, you want to make sure that you check it with everybody in your organization. Do you have any tokens? Disable them now.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Start with that.
Then something totally different. Obviously, AI has an impact on lots of things, and one of the things I've been saying for a while already is that in the world of AI, interface is becoming less important, right? Because there is this concept of what I call disposable interfaces. It's coming, but anyway, what you see, and which is very interesting, is that some organizations that were very, very heavily on their interface, people using their interface to get work done, I think start to realize that if they keep holding to that way of working, that basically they will lose customers over other applications. I'm going to give a very concrete example that triggered me to mention this. So Buffer is a very simple tool to schedule social posts on LinkedIn, Twitter, X, Blue Sky, whatever you want. And it's a very nice organization, a remote company as well. And they have been not exposing an API to publish posts, I believe, because they said, okay, you need to use our interface. That's the best experience you can have, whatever. Of course, because it would sacrifice their own, the experience, and probably people would just never go to Buffer anymore. But actually, I think yesterday they announced that they now have an API and even an MCP where basically you can tie in Buffer with any tool that you would want to use, which is, I think, the only way or the only reason they do that is to try to stay alive, because probably they see a huge decline in users doing it in a different way.
Yeah, I think the interface, I'm not going to say the interface is dead, but for these specific tools which you want to automate, which are basically automation in itself, you wanna be able to do it via an API, or an MCP, so that it can be used within your AI environment. And I think to make it even more interesting, I saw a statement, I think it passed on our Slack this week, where somebody said, well, even APIs, are they not going to be in the future just one API endpoint which you can use, and then
internally, that's a huge data breach.
Internally, it will be just like an LLM who will call the right API endpoint, so you don't need to do documentation. I think I'm not going to say it's going to go that far, but it's interesting to think about Where do you draw the line
it's something,
of the
yeah,
language
I think
interface?
that's the kind of what the MCP tries to do, right? And that makes sense, but there you still need to define all the tools and resources available in the MCP. I actually was discussing with a lead or customer yesterday, and they do lots of integrations with external tools, and they now have this through a system that's, and because it's lots of local integration, it's not like you use Zapier and you have everything. It's like the local vendors. And so they were paying a third-party supplier to build those connectors for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay, we want to stop using that. Can we do this with AI? And actually, I was thinking about it. You just use this regular OpenAPI file. And basically, I think based on that, you can very easily generate a connector these days. I don't think you even need AI for that. So I think definitely there is a lot of things to say about that, but I think the importance of good APIs is getting even more important. So the API economy, which is something that I've been advocating for years, and I give lectures about years, I would say 10 years ago or something like that, about open data. I think it becomes even more important these days. Yeah.
It's like fashion, right? Everything comes back.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Very nice. No, I think it's a nice observation, and it's cool to see that happening because, for example, with Buffer, the first thing I'll do is take the MCP, put it in my flow, and start scheduling like that instead of having to go to their tool. Anyway, that's it. I think for this week. Thanks a lot, Sjimi, and see you in two.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.